Today's been a very insightful evening for me, very raw, very personal as well. Wanted to be here today because I wanted to get a chance to share some of my personal experience, but also to really give some personal impact on what's going on for the Go Home Shut Up thing that's happening. Because 3 years ago I actually had a unit with my ex, and I was going through very, very severe domestic violence, 3 young children, and I went to housing, and I called refuges and stuff like that, to start with, of course. Went to housing for some assistance and was knocked back because they told me I had a place to stay, they told me I had a place to go. Yeah, very, very hard experience to go through, knowing that in your own home you don't feel safe. So I had so many documentations of falling behind in paying lots of bills and stuff, which he had forced over a 3-day period, putting a phone in my face and giving me numbers to call and making me forcefully put all bills in my name, where I had to pay all the bills, and obviously I couldn't do that. I attempted to study on a number of occasions, and he'd fluked that for me. Went to work a couple of times. He'd come to my work, caused me difficulties, so I'd have to leave work. Had no family support network, got married when I was 17, had children pretty young. So I really didn't have anywhere to fall back on, except for the Department of Housing, which I felt they failed me entirely and completely. I ended up leaving home, taking my kids with me. We'd be on the street for a couple of nights, I'd go back home. And he knew that I had nowhere to go. He knew that there was no one to help me. He knew I had nobody. So he would just wait and play the mind games with me. Oh, she'll be back soon, and this and that. So I would go a couple of times. There's one stint I went for 3 months. I went away to a refuge for 3 months, and that's all they could have me there for. They really tried to fight for me to stay there. I found that the Department of Housing, no offence, but for my circumstance, were ill-equipped. That's why I think it's very important that some people that have better knowledge of what they're working with would be more established to work with people such as myself, a victim of survivor of domestic violence. Yay! I ended up leaving, but I didn't leave to a refuge. I left to go on the street, and that's what I'm worried about. I'm worried about young mums, mothers, doesn't matter how old, young or old, anyone can go through domestic violence, any walk of life can go through domestic violence. Post-traumatic is immense. I mean, just sitting here today has been so hard. Like, I've had to walk out and recompose myself and come back in. And I thought, no, got to stick around, got to stay here, got to do this. It's not just for me, it's for other mums, it's for other women out there to feel empowered, because I'm afraid that they're going to lose their empowerment. These men are getting the wind of what's happening. They know refuges are closing, and the women might not even try to even call because they'll be too scared to be knocked back. They'll be too scared. They might resort to going to the street. Then combination of domestic violence and homelessness. Well, we had both. I did hear somebody mention being roomed or whatnot for a stint on top of a pub. Hello, yes, we were there. 3 young children smoking and drinking downstairs, and we were upstairs. So, I mean, you know, that also is a major concern, but I'm just really concerned for what's happening today. Just the fact that, please, 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 young mums out there, young women out there going through violence, please still keep trying to get some help. Even though you can hear that refuges are closing, there's got to be something somewhere. Keep trying, don't give up. I'm actually doing a diploma now, studying community services and welfare. I aced my domestic violence assessments and presentations that I did. Thank you. And, thank you. Feel very humbled to be here today. I didn't get any flowers. I love flowers, but I didn't get any. There's a story about that. But yeah, thank God I didn't get any flowers. Still here today. My boys are doing wonderfully. It's a hard yakka. I've got to thank the refuge back here, which is, hi, wave, Jane's Place. jobs in the next couple of months. Tempe's closed down. It's not just me, a lot of other mums and children, families out there, take our hats off to you. So thank you so much for everything that you have done for us, always. Thank you.
Paul Keating seconded Usher, who's now the Chancellor of St Mary's Cathedral, that actually wrote the Usher report that led to the 4 major church providers getting the welfare funding in this country. Taking it back quite a number of years, let's not forget that the orphanages actually stemmed from religion. The starting of child labour, the child abuse, and all, a lot of things around that led to the churches being as wealthy as they are today. It was on the backs of children's labour, on the backs of trafficking of children, etc.
So the government has made a commitment that no refuge will close as a result of these reforms. So yes, they may be managed by different organisations, but the government has made that commitment that no government-owned refuge will close as a result of these reforms.
Services being transferred from domestic violence to a transitional home. That's what we are.
Ask me to give you an example. This is not happening. Jean's place is closing. Now, the idea that there is in that funding package, crisis refuge and other, early intervention and prevention resourcing. When you even look at that, across what used to be in that area for women and children, it is less. And what is not taken into account in this is actually that these services are built up over 30 years that are about a sector that has a level of independence in the community and that they are trusted and that women know where to go. A lot of the buildings across the state are buildings that women occupied in the 70s that did not belong to Housing New South Wales. They were a building that the women walked around in their communities and they found. And they did a huge amount of negotiation and they worked for years for nothing to run those services. And
I'm Anne from Domestic Violence Services, and very grateful that we were successful as the preferred tender in the Nepean and Blue Mountains area. But as far as I understand, that the Nepean Blue Mountains area and the Central Coast are the only 2 areas that maintained their women and children domestic violence service focus in the whole state. But the consultation just did not happen.
That this whole program being run by Department of Housing is such a nonsense. You know about buildings, you don't know about people. And women are going to be beaten because there's no consequences that I see for the perpetrators. So they will be free to continue, those that choose to use violence to control women. Not all men do that. I certainly know enough of them, thank God. But it happens and it's not going away. There's no consequences. What have women got? They've got a refuge. But not so much anymore. Our service is now classified as transitional. We don't even know what that transitional is going to look like. Is that a mixture of sexes? Is it every condition that unfortunately we come across? It's not going to work. And we're women with domestic violence, with accompanying children, going to feel safe.
I'm Jan from St George Women's Housing. Sally, we run a transitional service. Our focus is on domestic and family violence, and we've worked with 60 clients less than the whole tender, the whole generalist tender package asks them to work with. So where are all of those women and children And we have a very strong emphasis on case management for children who've been traumatised from domestic and family violence. Now, if you don't go to a refuge, where else do you get that? I have a lot of experience working in refuges, and that's why when I went into the transitional service, we changed our model. We changed our model to do outreach and intervention and to focus on children. That's why we have so many clients. Are they listed separately on any tender package? No. You can have a minute of silence for that one. That's our future, our traumatised future. 1 in every 2 jobs that the police attend are for what? Domestic and family violence. Who witnesses it? Children. What do we care about it? No, it's all right. We've put the care of children into people who don't have a very good record of care for children.
I'm Sharon McKinnon, that's Sharon with 2 R's if anybody wants to quote me. And I work currently at Jessie Street Domestic Violence Service, a service for sole women in the western suburbs, and I'd like to say that SEs that has existed for over 30 years in our neighbourhood will not exist. They weren't able to tender for a package, so there's one that went because it was a purpose-built refuge, mind you. Department of Housing needs to come out and bloody well look at it. How are you going to turn that into transitional housing? I don't know. Probably put up a block of flats, I don't know. But aside from that, evidence-based has been talked about. I've spent, as part of a JWA, in a successful tender, which doesn't mean it's all bloody beer and skittles, I can tell you, because we've got a model and a budget that means I am now unemployed, thank you very much. This is all propaganda and bullshit that we've been fed. If they want to see evidence, I have just spent the last week, and I'm getting very emotional, standing at archived files, rows and rows of archived files. There's your bloody evidence that women's refuges work because those women are still bloody well alive. And the ones that couldn't get into a bloody refuge because we don't have enough spaces. Now I'm angry and that's okay. Because anger should drive you into action, not depression. But this government and a lot of people who have aided and abetted the government to get to this position have driven a lot of people into depression. There are going to be less places in refuges for women. We already turned 1 in 2 away. Wake up and smell the bloody coffee. What does that mean? Go home and shut up. Don't reach out for help because it's not going to be there. You can talk early intervention and prevention all you like, the perpetrators aren't stopping. And women in refuges are not going to stop that. They're going to be there to pick up the bloody pieces and try and get a woman to be empowered enough to stand up and say enough is enough and do what she can. Putting a roof over a woman's head does not stop the problem. Putting her in a motel on her own with no cooking facilities and a couple of children does not fix the problem, but they tick the box and say she's housed. It's support. And who's going to give that to them? Rapidly rehouse them. Where? And what happens once they've shifted them into a little roof over their head, or God forbid, one of the new knapsacks out in the park? What happens once they're housed to all the support needs? And yes, we've got a whole big focus on early intervention and prevention. They're turning our whole model around. Why? I nearly said the F word. Why stuff with something that has worked for 40 years? What is wrong? Come and see the evidence. Come and see the evidence of all the women and children who are successfully leading productive lives today because women's refuges existed. And when I said about government's got to where they got and we're in the position we're in now, I would just like to ask, is there a representative here from DV New South Wales?
No.
Why not? Why not? Why isn't there? It was mentioned before in the speech.
We did invite them.
You knew who to invite? We're a member and we don't even know who works there. Now, what is that about? What is that about? The women's refuge movement, as I knew it, I've worked in women's refuges now for 28 years, was a movement started at the ground roots, as we heard before, because there was a need. We don't even have a women's refuge movement anymore. DV New South Wales is what it was renamed. You know, there's been a lot of people who've helped this situation get to where it is today. And shame on every one of them. Women are going to die because of what's happening right now. And I don't care. I've already offered to come and camp out in Sally's Refuge. They're not having it as a transitional property. We're going to set up tents for women. In Essie Women's Refuge Yard, it's going to be safer in a tent for some of those women than where they're going to end up. Thank you.
Okay, so I just want to say that also as part of when we heard about this fucking bullshit, some of us students from different universities got together and also started a student support for women's services, but you know, obviously not only that label, but to kind of try and collect information and to try to pull our resources and our time and our energy and our passion towards supporting you know, all of you here and, you know, hopefully helping people, you know, not die or whatever. Anyway, so next Thursday we're going to have a vigil at Pitt Street Mall at 5:30. It's not going to be morning, like we've got candles, we can fucking blow it, we can burn it up. It'll be at 5:30 at Pitt Street Mall and it will, like all the shoppers can just see, it will raise awareness. We're going to have speakers, we're going to have open mic. We really like people who've had experience working and yeah, to also share their experiences with it. And yeah, thanks everyone.
But I've been sitting here as an older, and my time is done, and I well and truly know it, but I still get my ego rubbed occasionally by some wonderful women. But can I say to your collective, thank you very much, because sometimes we older ones wonder where your politics are. We wonder, do you know what the word feminist means? Well, thank you very much, because I'm much reassured, and you could probably teach me a thing or two. Young women, that you're out there, you're eager, because one of the other things I thought about, besides the buildings and the other things, is that it's very, very sad, and sure, maybe some services will be good, but I was very depressed about the loss of feminist philosophy. Yeah. Very, very worried. I will not go home completely happy tonight, but I'm content to know that it's all in the hands of young feminist women. Thank you very much.
Yeah, I mean, first of all, I'd just like to say one thing about overstayers. A lot of them happen to be asylum seekers, and they're not entitled to anything by the department. I share a house with 3 asylum seekers, 2 without work rights, which means they don't have Medicare. We've got to unite with them. We can't do that. What's wrong with occupation? I mean, most of those places were established during the occupation in the 70s I live in Gibb Street, Newtown. quite a lot of people my parents' age occupied the Housing Commission in Gibbs Street. I don't live in the Housing Commission, but it certainly keeps Gibbs Street a nice street. And they exist because of the occupation movement of the 70s. It strikes me that, you know, those places came about because of occupation. Well, let's just reoccupy. Tomorrow is the memorial for a woman called Joyce Stevens, who was one of the great founders of Refuges, Leichhardt Women's Health Centre, IWD, and I just wanted to remember her tonight as well.
Another concern that I have is the funding for these services with little or no follow-ups. You've got the church-based organisations that are multi-millionaires, if not billionaires, like, for example, the Catholic Church is, and you're not keeping your eyes on them. It's all well and good to sit there and say this isn't closing, that isn't closing, but the fact is it is. And the fact is that there's people out on the streets that are dying on the streets because you're coming from an area where you're sitting in an office and you're not getting out of that office and seeing what's really going on.
Another observation. Years ago, we got somewhere because doors were open. You could go into a minister's office really, whether he liked it or not, and he would listen to you. And then there was a discovery about electronic doors. You can't get there anymore.
I work in an Aboriginal Youth Service Centre and our primary area of business is working with victims of violence. We weren't consulted about this. My understanding is that Aboriginal Affairs was consulted and Aboriginal Housing. Now, that is not their core business. It's not what they do. So they're not the voice for me as an Aboriginal woman. They're not the voice of victims of domestic violence. So I think it's about time that government does consult with people, like everyone else has said, on the ground, people that have that expertise in this area. And I'm really, I'm really concerned because Aboriginal women are already disadvantaged. Women are disadvantaged. Aboriginal women are further disadvantaged. And we're seeing all these services that are getting up off the ground. The ones at James Place and Clara Women's Refuge, which is at Rono that have closed, have both got Aboriginal staff employed there. You know, there are promises about employing Aboriginal people in these services. You know, what are we going to get? People that are easily conformed into what government wants them to be, what St. Mary's wants them to be, Salvation Army, or whoever gets attended. We want people that are strong-minded Aboriginal women that can work with their own people, know what the issues are on the ground, and actually be advocates, strong advocates that aren't just there in a volunteer capacity, or a capacity that they're actually told what to do and do what they're told.